not good news. Evening. Welcome to a special board meeting of November 9th, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Dr. Briggy, would you be so kind as to lead us in the flag salute this evening?
Sure. Thank you, President Marcus. If everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your right hand over your heart and begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Briggy. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Margot, seconded by Mrs. Wells. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Okay. Is there any public comment tonight for this session, Dr. Briggy?
There is no public comment for the special meeting tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are here today to discuss item 4A, the process by which we will hopefully appoint a new provisional board member. Before we start, I would just like to make a small comment that I want to thank everyone who at one time or another turned in an application and took the time to show their interest in running and being a member of the school board. We are very, very much appreciative of that. I think we had a great number of applicants, and unfortunately we couldn't take them all. I know that the board members are going to be torn tonight between making a selection. I think they all have their certain qualities that they think will be important on the board, and I'm looking forward to a very open discussion, a very good discussion. So just know that we can only select one person, and unfortunately there'll be some disappointment, but I want to thank you again for your really honest and dedicated interest in being on the school board. Thank you. Okay, so do we have any ideas of how we want to proceed? We had our interviews last week, and we can only select one. Is there any ideas of how we might want to go forward in selecting them? Any ideas anybody wants to propose? We had 7 candidates. We heard all 7. We might like to perhaps put them in an order for ourselves or whatever, and maybe vote for 3 or 4 and then see how many can go on with predicting. If we vote for 5, we might be able to pick 3 or more that go on to the second round that had 3 or more votes. Or we can drop it down to 3 and do just some ideas. Want to put it out there for the rest of the board to discuss. So, Mr. Raymer, do you have any ideas?
Whoa. Sorry. I'd say that if each board member were to be able to put forward either 1 or 2 of their top choices and then have a discussion regarding those or tally votes like we've done in the past and have a discussion. But yeah, narrowing it down by each board member's either top 1 or top 2 candidates.
Okay, Dr. Stern.
I agree with that. I think that's a good way to start.
So you're suggesting that we put, what, should we put 2 or 3? Put our 2 favorites forward?
How about 2, and then see where it goes, yes.
And see where it goes from there? Noah? Mr. Margot?
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, excuse me. KBF, can we check the levels on these? Because we're getting a lot of feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Wells.
I would suggest that we put more than 2 candidates. My fear is that if we get stuck on a 2-2, then we're really going to be box ourselves in, and that perhaps we should look at putting forth a minimum of 3, if not 4, of your top choice candidates, because otherwise I think we can just get boxed in right away.
Okay, I sort of had
Oh, sorry. Can I respond to that?
yes.
I think that would be our privilege. If we wanted to do that, we could do that. I don't know if we all have 3 or 4 or whatever, so I don't want anybody to be forced to throw somebody in there they're not particularly happy with, unless it comes down to it after this round, and then we have to, go in there. But I think if you have 3, or you can put in 3. I don't see that as a problem. I just wouldn't make it a requirement.
Okay.
Well,
Perhaps then maybe we compromise on 3, up to 3.
You
are
can
you
put
suggesting with 3 then? Is that agreeable with you, Mr. Raymer?
Yeah, I think
Resounding yes.
it may have cut me. We'll see. I think they're saying up to 3, so we can choose to put in however many we want up to 3. I'd say I'm okay with that.
Okay, Dr. Stern, up to 3? Oh, everybody puts their 3 top candidates forward?
Yes.
Mr. Margot?
I think, like I said, everybody can put in 3. Everybody can put in 3. I don't think if you don't have 3, you don't have to shoehorn somebody in. I don't
Okay.
want people to feel uncomfortable with a suggestion, per se. I would rather let this round play itself out and then see if, in order to find a compromise, we have to go deeper. So that's, but I respect if you guys, people want to put in 3, that it doesn't change it, because it would need.
Up to
it would
3.
need- Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, Mrs. Wells?
I think that I would agree that up to
Okay.
3, pretty much up to 3.
Okay, so, I think do we want to do this by a written ballot, or would you like to just mention them out loud? And then we'll have, well, unfortunately, Mrs. Krashauer is not here tonight, so I was hoping that she would be able to tally them.
We do have a board clerk.
Would you like to tally them?
So, but I will say, I do believe that it is my understanding that board members have to claim who they're putting forward.
Right.
So
But you'll
Yeah.
keep a tally.
I'm happy to keep a tally. I just want to make sure
Okay,
that
all right.
people are just not
It's
turning
not a-
in
it's
ballots.
not a
to
secret
me.
ballot.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so we will start with, and of course, your vote, Mr. Raymer, is provisional, so that, not to get confused, as I think what happened once before. Okay, Mr. Raymer, who did you want to put forward?
I would
have
like
it
to
on
put
this.
forward Dr. Aaron Reitman and Mrs. Judy Menucheri.
Who?
Aaron Reitman, and Judy Menucheri.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Stern.
I would like to vote
Can you
for
talk real loud so I can hear you, please?
Judy Friedman and Bridget Lipson.
2 candidates only?
And Gabe Halimi.
Okay. Noah?
I would do Bridget Lifson, Judy Friedman, and only 2 candidates right now. Thank
Who
you.
was the second one?
Judy Friedman.
I'm sorry, no, will you say those again?
Bridget Lifson and Judy Friedman. I'm only doing 2. Thank you.
Okay, Mary, Mrs. Wells.
I would put forth Judy Menucheri, Gabe Halimi, and Robert Myers.
Okay, and Mrs. Marcus is putting forth Judy Manicherry, Robert Myers, and Gabe Halimi. So, well, we sort of narrowed it down to 5 people, I believe. 1 with 3 votes and 4 with 2 votes. So I think we're now down to 4 people on that we can go forward with, if that's, want to discuss these candidates, or you want to just now go to 2 votes? Give,
There's 5 candidates.
I have 5, yeah, I'm sorry, it's 5.
Can you name who those 5 are at this point, please?
Okay, we have Gabe Halimi, who had 3 votes. Judy Friedman had 2. Bridget Lifson had 2. Robert Myers had 2. And Judy Manicherry had 2. Any thoughts on this now? Mr. Raymer?
It's a great list. I mean, the top 7 were all absolutely fantastic, so I already knew it was going to get harder from then. May I defer to speak later?
Okay. Dr. Stern?
I'm also going to defer at this point.
Mr. Margot?
I'll speak. What else is new? So after reviewing the interviews and my notes, it was very, very clear to me that Judy Friedman did an incredible job standing out from the rest of the pack. She was more knowledgeable, having had kids go through K-12 here already, 1 in college and 1 on the way next year. She answered every question with solid answers, and she was concise, assimilated data quickly, and gave great analysis. I think she would be an outstanding board member. She is not coming in with a particular agenda, made that clear, and her focus were students. Her questions were student-based. Her issues were around academic programs. I'll just wait, sorry. And she would be able to hit the ground running with this board and have the least learning curve out of the candidates. Does it mean the other candidates couldn't do the job? No. I just feel that Judy Friedman could do the job better than the rest of them based on both her application and the interviews. I thought some of the other applicants that we're discussing had some struggles with responding to some of the questions, didn't have a depth of knowledge about a lot of things in this district, and would have a much longer and harder learning curve to be able to govern on the board, considering we are in the middle of a pandemic, we are in the middle of major construction, and we're in the middle of overhauling an academic program with a strategic plan. So to me, I would want to support the person who would be best suited to carry on that, and Judy had indicated her desire to keep the ship running as smoothly as possible, not looking to overturn things. So I certainly would want my colleagues to consider that as they move on, but I'm also realistic in the fact that we are divided for the most part on this, which is unfortunate. It'll be harder to come to a consensus that way. As far as Bridget Lifson is concerned, I think she was a straight shooter, and she is very aware of what she knows and what she doesn't know. She was the only candidate to get all 4 of our support for the interview process. So for me, she would be, in reality, an excellent compromise, a neutral candidate that I think does not have any real connection to any of us outside of the board. And it puts her in a prime position to be more successful, not having any particular allegiance to any one of us. I do feel very strongly about Judy and Bridget. I will leave it at that, and hopefully my colleagues can consider. I would say that because I'll play my 10-year on the board card here and say that I've seen a lot of different people sit in these seats, and it takes a certain mettle, METTLE mettle, to be able to be successful at this job. And I think that both Judy Friedman and Bridget Lifson have that, and would serve this community in the 1 year that they're here. And we would be very pleased, and I'm sure the community too would also be pleased at the work that they would put in, and the kind of sense of calm and neutrality they would bring to this board, which apparently, according to some of our interviewees, we are in dire need of. So that's my comments for now. Thank you.
Mrs. Wells?
Well, I would say that as I look at the list of candidates, I think it's true that they all gave very thoughtful and thorough answers. And I think with regards to Judy Manicherry, she was, she went to the school herself. She participated in ASB. She's moved back here to put her children in school. Since she's been here, she has been already participating in the district and is active. And I would say she has all those same qualities that you're describing with regards to Judy Friedman. However, she also has a very good rapport with many of the parents in her community, and I think that she is a bridge builder. And I think that's a really wonderful quality to have, especially at this time and for this next year. With regard to Gabe Halimi, I would say the same. He obviously had very thorough answers. He has been a student board member himself. He would hit the ground running. Unlike the other candidates, he is available to completely dedicate himself to being on the board during this time. And I think of all the candidates as well, he would hit the ground running. I also would say that he's the one candidate, he and Judy actually Manicherry, the 2 candidates that said that they would not run again. And so I think that's another thing to consider about the 2 of them. They both have really great qualities about them. And I think Robert Myers as well had strong answers to our different questions. He's aware of what's going on in the district. But unlike Judy and Gabe, he is working. So I don't know that, I think Gabe is going to have the most time to dedicate to being on the board. But I also feel like Judy has incredible rapport and could be really a really great bridge builder. And I think that's a very key point.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wells. Well, I would echo the words of Mrs. Wells in regard to Judy Manicherry. I find her very warm, very knowledgeable, very dedicated to the community, to the school, ready to step in. She has a good background on many of the issues that we will probably have to deal with. I feel that she would just bring a new face to the board that's a little bit different. And I really hope that I can get some support for her. I also like the fact that Gabe Halimi is also very outspoken and very open to seeing how boards operating and know what he thinks it should look like and so on. It's a very admirable quality, and he did speak his mind in front of us, and knowing that that could possibly, create a problem for him, but nonetheless, he still did. As far as Robert Myers was concerned, I thought he was still not completely involved. I liked the way he addressed the questions, the way he answered them to the best of his ability. I thought he would make a great new person on the board. I really feel that we are going to be at a standstill here, and I know that that's going to be a problem, but I do feel that I'm hoping that I can get some support for Judy Manicherry. I do feel that she brings a different element to the board than we've been able to have. So, she's different, and I think she knows so much. And she did answer the questions, and I don't, to come right out with your answers. When you look at these questions there, you have to take a moment and think about what your answers are going to be and put them together, put your thoughts together. And I thought she did a good job of that. She didn't come right out and she gave it a few minutes to think about it, thought about what her response would be so that she could be clear. I think she speaks very eloquently, and you have my feelings as far as my concern. And I'll go back to both Mr. Raymer and Dr. Stern for their comments. They didn't make any, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to agree with Mrs. Marcus and Mrs. Wells on the three candidates that they put forward of Judy Manicherry, Robert Myers, and Gabe Halimi. I think that Gabe Halimi and Robert Myers were the two candidates of these five that we have who really did put the students first in a lot of their answers and really tied a lot of their answers back to the betterment of the schools for the students and the student perspective that would be taken in regards to some of their answers. So I really appreciated that, and I think that they both did that to the best that we saw. I'd also say Gabe Halimi, having the background as a student board member and having served on other boards throughout his career, he would be able to get involved extremely quickly, especially since he has the desire. I know every candidate really has the desire to do so, but I think that he is the kind of person where if he really puts his mind to something, he can get into it almost immediately. At least that's what I got from our interview. So Gabe Halimi, an excellent candidate. Robert Myers, also a drive and a want to get involved. It's something that I've experienced myself, so I can sympathize with the feeling and understand what it's like to want to get involved and want to do your best to better a community that you are involved in. And I really respect that and think that that would bring a lot to this board and to the community and to the school district as a whole. And Judy Manicherry, as well as being extremely involved in the community now and in the past, also has an extremely different skill set than some of us. I think that the new knowledge that she would bring to the board would be beneficial to a lot of our projects, especially construction, given her background in that area in law. So it's a difficult choice for me, at least out of those three, but I think that I myself would put forward out of those three Gabe Halimi as the candidate who I think would best be on this board, given his prior experiences and, as Mrs. Marcus pointed out, his ability to provide feedback to the board that may have hindered his appointment. Regardless of that fact, I think that that's a very important quality, and just his whole emphasis on the building of teams and teamwork as a whole is extremely important, especially to this board and our community at this time. So I think Gabe Halimi is the best candidate out of these the three that I put forward and out of the five that we selected.
Dr. Stern.
Thank you, Mr. Raymer. I also wanted to add about Judy Friedman. She's had a wealth of experience with not only for-profit boards, but also nonprofit boards. My understanding is that she's on the board of the BHEF, or heavily involved. I think that based on her application and what she said in the interview, she really has an understanding of the partnership and the interworkings of the board and the different players, shall we say, in a way that I found was very comforting and intelligent. I think that this is a unique position in the sense that we have a one-year appointment, or a one-year situation on the board, and I think that it calls for people who can bring a certain balance and an understanding that it is relatively short-term. I found that Judy Friedman presented a roster of experience and intelligence that would be very helpful. She also she's not only a mom in BHUSD, but my understanding is her children are older. So she has been through the rounds of seeing her children progress through the school district in a way that perhaps some parents who have younger children may have not benefited from. Bridget Lifson, I find to also be a breath of fresh air, a certain temperament that I think would complement our board nicely, but also her experience, a quiet wisdom about her that I think would bring a lot. I felt her devotion to our school district very clearly. And then finally, Gabe Halimi, I echo a lot of the sentiments that my colleagues have said. I think that he has the motivation and the passion to do a great job. He's a father in the district. He certainly answered his questions with intelligence and with shall we say, the courage to provide some critiques, if you will. And I also find that he would be good as well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Noah? Mr. Margot? No? Mrs. Wells?
Well, I also think that it's important, like the fact that being involved in the school, I think, to the extent that Gabe Halimi was a student board member and he's remained, that he was involved then and that he wants to stay involved now that he's back. And I feel like from the answers that he provided, he really was current on the issues that are facing the district right now. And I found that he really would hit the ground running. I also like the fact that he's an attorney and that he's had professional experience and he's worked on boards, as well as his obvious dedication to our school district. And to the point that Amanda brought up previously, Amanda, when you talked about the fact that he started a school, he clearly cares about education and for the kids, and took that initiative. And I think that's another really great quality about him. So to Eli's point, I think for all of us as a board, I think it's also important for us to try and find a candidate that we can all agree on. And the fact that even at this point, there's that Gabe has 3 yeses right now, at least he's made the list for 3 of us, that I think that bodes well for us to be able to find somebody that we can all feel comfortable with to be on the board.
I just, in reviewing my notes on the candidates, they all did pretty good job, very good job, and so on. The one person that I did not feel that did a good job in the interview was Bridget, to be very honest. I thought her answers were weak. I did not think she showed any, it was like she was almost, to me, somewhat indifferent. I don't know if she was nervous or what, but I did not think that her particular interview was as strong as some of the others. That's just my personal take. I don't know anything about the lady. Everybody came and I listened, and the only one that I felt that was somewhat weak was that one particular candidate. All the rest of them I thought did a very good job, but that was one that I did not think did as great a job as the others. So I know we have to come to a decision. I hope we can make a decision and be flexible in that decision so that, as you know, the last thing we wanted to do is to go to an election if we can avoid it at all costs. And so we have to try to somehow come to an agreement. I would propose that right now, maybe we could each name our one candidate that we would like to move on, and then we could eliminate a couple more names. But we do need to get a majority of 3 for the candidate to go on. And I propose that as a suggestion.
President Marcus, I would suggest that what would be helpful for this board is to whoever we appoint should come in at a 4-0 vote. Okay? I think it will be difficult for us to relate our unity to the community if we don't do that. And I welcome continued discourse on this subject to see if we can find some
common ground.
compromise. So I would like to ask my colleagues, I have specific reasons. I wanted to try to keep my discussion on positive and why I am supporting people. But based on your opinion on Bridget Lifson, I think it's important to know that I don't agree with my colleagues about some of the answers that some of the other candidates that you guys supported. I kept copious notes and I've watched the video many times. And I find Mr. Myers, as much as I appreciate his drive to want to serve, I think he has the largest learning curve out of any of the applicants.
He has the what?
The largest learning curve out of any of the applicants. I felt his answers could have been easily looked up on the internet, and they were pretty stock answers. And it's not a fault of his, he hasn't done it yet. You know, he's not in the mix. He doesn't have children that have gone through the district. He doesn't know where the bones are buried. And it's just for that reason, he needs to just have more experience. So I don't agree that all of the candidates had great answers. So I want to be clear on that. Some of the candidates skirted the questions, and when you got down to the substance of their answers, they didn't answer the question being asked. They answered something, but not the question being asked. And that's another thing that turned me off of some of the candidates, and I don't need to follow up with names on that, but there are reasons why they're not on my list. And I didn't appreciate that because as a teacher, and you and I go back and forth about this as a teacher thing a lot, is you want the people to respond to the prompt. You don't want them to go off on a tangent. And you need to make sure they're focused and answering the question being asked. And I felt some of them related information that was irrelevant to the actual question being asked.
I didn't pick any of those, I don't think.
Okay. But I picked up on a couple of them. And I made notes about that. Now, as far as Mr. Halimi, because I feel, I see the writing on the wall here, and it's clear that this is the direction the board is headed. Some of my issues which are holding me back from Mr. Halimi is some of his feelings about sending everything back to committees, sending all the board approvals back to committees. That's not the job of the committees. Committees are not tasked to do our job. We're tasked to do our job. We're elected to do our job. So it worries me that we're going to put forward somebody that doesn't really know what their responsibility is. The responsibility is to actually prepare and be ready to vote on items put on the agenda. That's our responsibility. That's literally what we do. And set the tone. Now, I did agree with him that it starts at the top. I did agree with him about other things that he said. He hammered on us a little too hard, and he kept on saying, to my own detriment, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say that. But I also don't think he fully understands what we do before he was hammering on us. And I know he was a student board member, Eli, but it's a very different experience when you've been in closed sessions and dealing with other issues. So it's very hard to equate his experience as a student board member to the experience needed. It's more of those who have, like Judy Friedman, who have served on actual boards and understand dynamics of boards. Plus, I advocated so much for Judy, not just because of her years in the district. Her mother was a teacher in the district. She grew up in the district. And she also works with the RAND Corporation on education. And she was very education focused in her responses, in her application. And now more than ever, we need that. We need education. We need to focus on education. I put items on the agenda tonight to that effect. And I think I don't want to just give up on that. So this will be my last hurrah for Judy Friedman to see if my colleagues would consider consider her, and then we can circle back about Mr. Halimi if that's the direction of the board.
Okay, well, I think at this point, Mayor, Mrs. Wells?
I mean, I'd like to say, I disagree with you about Judy Friedman. I felt like the answers were very, they were not as keyed into what's happening necessarily in our district in many ways. And I felt like, yes, she's been.
Can you give me an example?
It just, the tone of it was like the speak that we hear out in, like, what is kind of like what are the pat answers, so to speak. And I didn't find that those were necessarily as thoughtful as with regard to the issues that we're facing. I think that Gabe Halimi was more keyed into having watched board meetings and listening and already trying to get up to speed. I, personally disagree with you about the use of our committees as a board. I think it's really important. We have board subcommittees for that reason, to support the board. They're represented by the board, and it is a resource for us to use, and I think we should be using that resource as a board. I think it's really important. Or why are we asking these people to be on these committees? So I don't.
Well, to advise on other things, but not necessarily to advise us on our votes. We tasked those committees with other things, like OPEB with the Finance Committee when it worked on that. They actually do stuff and then they bring it to the board on their own, and that's extremely helpful when the committees work in that regard.
Well, I think we can task them with issues that we'd like them to provide their expertise and opinions on as well. I don't think it's about providing a vote. It's about providing information so that they can go in depth on certain issues where they can focus in on items regarding finances or facility and construction. That's why we set those committees
Right, but
up.
in the end, we ran to sit here and take those votes and be educated on those issues because we have to vote. They could
completely
advise.
agree that it
they
is
could
our
advise.
responsibility, but my take on his comment was that we should utilize our resources that we have in our community.
I think we
support us as a
have.
board.
I think we have, and the Finance Committee, beginning the OPEB pre-funding program, was one of the best things our committees have ever done in the last 10 years. So I agree. When used correctly, it could be an extremely beneficial situation.
I agree. So I don't want to get
No, we don't have to.
sidetracked into the issue of subcommittees. I just believe that
Well,
that comment to me was that he was aware
well, I
of the
think,
resources. I would suggest that we vote on 2 people right now and see if we can narrow down and see if we can go to the next level and then see where
well,
we
I was
get.
going to suggest that we each get to vote for one person now of the 5 people that are here.
I would recommend 2.
2?
I think it's going to be the same, and we're going to be locked again. If we at least go to 1, we'll be able to see if anybody has a majority of the board to move forward. If we keep on doing 2, we're never going to get to that.
Okay,
So-
any thoughts on that? Go for 2, go for 1. What do you want to do, Mr. Raymer? Do you have any thoughts?
I think going for 2 would leave us in a loop like we had before, although I do believe that at least I hope the discussion that we've had may have altered some of the board members' votes. So I think that we can start with 2, and if it does leave us at a standstill, then of course we can each give 1.
Okay, Dr. Stern,
Yeah, I
2.
think 2.
Mr. Well, and Margot?
It's going to wind up being 2, but I think we should just do 1. But
You
I'm
wanna
sure-
do 1, okay.
Yeah, I just want to get.
Okay,
Yes,
Mrs.
sir.
Wells?
My suggestion is 2, and then we can always go down to
Okay,
1.
all right. So let's start with the next round of voting now. We're going to go for 2. Mr. Raymer?
Gabe Halimi and Judy Manucherry.
Oh, just a minute. Okay, Dr. Stern?
Judy Friedman, Gabe Halimi.
Oh, Gabe, wait, Gabe, Judy Friedman, Gabe Halimi. Okay, Mr. Margot?
Judy Friedman and Bridget Lifson.
Judy Friedman and
Bridget
Lifson. Okay, Mary?
Gabe Halimi and Judy Manucherry.
Okay, and that will also be my vote, Gabe Halimi and Judy Manucherry. So we do now have a 3-1 vote for Mr. Halimi. according to this. I know you
Is there
would
a
like it
chance,
to be
Mr.
4-0,
Margot, that you
but
would feel comfortable with Gabe Polino?
we do have a majority of this. If it would be Mr. Halimi that would be our candidate provisional. If you'd like to make it 4-0, I don't want to. It's up to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marquez. I did want to respond to one thing that Mrs. Wells said in looking at my notes. Judy Friedman is the only one that understood title funding. She brought it up outside of the basic aid and ADA. She understands title funding and CalPERS. She understands the recovery, COVID, the upcoming mandates from the state. She was very clear about that and clear about what students need and what kind of students we want to graduate from our district. And I just, like I said, I know you and I disagree with this, Mrs. Wells, but she was extremely student-centric and very specific about other things, especially regarding APs, training programs, professional development, reasons that we are declining enrollment. She brought up the fact that we can't compete with religious schools and what our private schools offering that we're not. She dove into deep on all of those things. So her understanding of this district, once again, I would say, and I know I'm a Sisyphus here, pushing the boulder up the hill, but I know that she is the most qualified candidate that we interviewed. Whether she gets the position, I can see that that's probably not going to happen. But as far as Mr. Halimi, I would welcome him with open arms, and if that's the direction that the board goes. But I, as a board member who has been there and done that, am very cautious about some of the things he had to say, and I would like him to understand what his role really is on a board. In this capacity, not as a student board member, because he's very intelligently corporate minded. That's where he was the last 20 years, being very successful. And I did get a chance to speak to Mr. Halimi long before this whole process started, as I believe most of us did, because he reached out. And I found him to be very engaging and very intelligent. And I was supporting him because my votes on the application process are recorded. I was supporting him 100% until the interview, and then I got a little turned off on the interview. And you're nodding your head because I think you saw some of the same things.
I did.
But I also understand that we are looking at either a $500,000 special election or $100,000 election in June, which would only seat a board member for 5 months. We're not even sure right now if the county would make us wait till June or force us to do it in April. Either way, it would be a use of general funds that is not for students. So it's very hard to justify, even though he's not, I don't think he was any of our first choice, by the way, tonight. But he might be our compromise. So that being the case, I will support Mr. Halimi to try to get some harmony and stability on the board, but hopefully he knows that this grizzly old man here has his eye out.
You have a good history.
I have one eye open.
By the way, I just wanted to tell you, Mr. Margot, that I did watch the tapes again the next day and really took, when you're here and you're listening to the questions, and I did go through the tapes again, and I tried to be very, very objective on all of them. And I agree with you on some of the things that Mr. Halimi did say, that we could have taken some, bite the bullet on it. I agree with that. But I think he comes in with a lot of experience on the board, but not in the private, and that the sector that you and I know so much about. But it becomes one of where we can agree on somebody. And though he wasn't our first choice, as you well know, and for me, but I do feel that I will welcome him with open arms. I will probably have a little coffee with him and talk about why he wasn't my number one choice and be very honest with him.
I think he's gotten the message clear by now that he was. It's bizarre, but when I spoke to a former council member who said to me, "You're most likely none of you are going to get your number one choice. You're going to have to compromise on 2 or 3." And this council person was correct, and I respect the process, and I do want to move forward as a board to the best of our ability, and get the work done now for our students, because they are struggling out there and it's difficult. And
I'm on your team.
we need to get the attention off of us, is what we need to do.
Okay, so with that in mind, I am going to, what was the other?
We have to take a vote on it.
Yeah, we have to take a vote. The approval, I would like to make a motion to approve Gabe Halimi as the provisional board appointee to fill the vacancy until November of 2022. Is that the right date, I believe?
Yes.
Make a
I'll second.
Who said that?
I did.
Thank you, Mary. Moved by Mrs. Marcus, seconded by Mrs. Wells to approve. I would call for the question. Mr. Raymer?
Yes.
Mrs. Wells? Dr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Margot?
Yes.
Mrs. Wells?
Yes.
And Mrs. Marcus is a yes. It's approved. And you can go make a phone call.
Sure can.
Okay.
And I will.
We will be starting our meeting in exactly 10 minutes. So thank you, everybody. And meeting is adjourned. It's now 4:50, so we have about 10 minutes. Okay?